Hello, my friends! Welcome back to another episode of CRT's Cozy Corner, Shakespeare Edition. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, so how about another tragedy? Today we're going to be reading a very, very popular piece called Hamlet. Did you know that Hamlet mentions St. Patrick more than any other Shakespeare play? True story. All right, so if you are ready, let's go ahead and take a deep breath. And we will get started. On the misty battlements of a castle, two guards peered into the darkness. Footsteps approached, and their knuckles whitened on the grips of their spears, until at last a familiar figure emerged from the mist, wrapped in a warm cloak. It was a young man named Horatio. Horatio greeted the guards. "Marcellus, Bernardo, I have come as you asked. Has the thing appeared again tonight?" "There's nothing stirring yet," replied Bernardo. "I know you think we imagined it," Marcellus added, "but now if the apparition comes again, you'll see for yourself." "Hush, hush, it will not appear," Horatio said sensibly. "Shh, look, here it comes," Marcellus hissed. Along the battlements, drifting out of the mist, came a ghost. It was dressed in armor, with a crown on its head, a grizzled beard, and a grimly frowning face. "It looks like the dead king, Horatio," whispered Bernardo. "Very," Horatio breathed, harrowed with fear and wonder. The ghost stopped and turned to face them. Horatio found his voice and spoke up. "What are you? In heaven's name, speak!" But the ghost merely drifted on and was lost in the night. Bernardo turned to Horatio, who was pale and trembling. "See, it's not just our imagination. What do you think now?" he urged. Horatio weighed his words for a moment. "I would not have believed it had I not seen it with my own eyes," he admitted at last. A crowing rooster broke the eerie silence, and they looked to the east, where a russet dawn was creeping into the sky. The night watch was over. "Let's tell Prince Hamlet what we have seen," Horatio said. "If the spirit speaks to anyone, I bet it will to him." Later that morning, all the noblemen, including Hamlet, were in court, summoned by Claudius, the new king of Denmark. Hamlet's father, the previous king, had died very recently while Hamlet had been away studying in Wittenberg. He had been bitten by a snake while sleeping in the gardens, so the story went. But not long after, his mother had married Hamlet's uncle, Claudius, who had then been crowned king. All this disruption was causing unrest in nearby countries, let alone at home. After dispatching messengers to calm the unrest, King Claudius turned to the next matter at hand. The son of his advisor, Polonius, was waiting to speak to him. "What would you like, Laertes?" "Your leave, my lord," the young man replied, "to return to France. I came willingly to Denmark for your coronation, but now my duty's done, my thoughts turn back to France." "If your father Polonius agrees, then go," Claudius nodded. Laertes bowed and took his leave, and the king turned to another young man sitting near him, his face turned away. It was Prince Hamlet. His face was pale and shadowed, and he was dressed all in black, in mourning for his dead father. "Hamlet, my nephew and now son," the king said, raising a scowl from Hamlet, "how come the clouds still hang on you?" "Yes, Hamlet, stop dwelling on your father's death," said the queen. "It's the way of things. Everything that lives must die." "Yes, mother, it is the way of things," Hamlet agreed. "Well then, why does it seem so particularly difficult for you?" "Seems?" Hamlet's eyes flashed. "It is. I don't know about seems. My grief is not just my black cloak or an expression on my face. I'm not just showing it. I feel it too." "It's good and dutiful to mourn your father," said King Claudius smoothly, "but to carry on with it for so long is wrong. Leave your grief. Think of me as your father now. You are, after all, the successor to my throne. Your plan to go back to your studies at Wittenberg is against my wishes. I ask you to remain here." "Yes, Hamlet, stay with us here," the queen echoed. "I shall do my best to obey you, mother," Hamlet bowed. "That is a fair reply," said the king. "Madam, let us go." Standing with the queen at his side, the king swept out of the room, followed by his advisors and courtiers, leaving Hamlet alone. The young man, who had risen to his feet as they left, now sank back with a cry of despair. Oh, I wish I could dissolve into nothing. Oh, God, that it should come to this. Only 2 months dead? No, not even 2. He winced as he remembered how his mother used to dote on his father. And yet within a month she married my uncle. Wickedly quickly. It cannot come to any good, but though my heart breaks, I can do nothing but hold my tongue. Horatio and the 2 guards found him there, with his head still in his hands. Hearing them, he looked up. A smile touched his sad face when he saw his friend Horatio. "What brings you from Wittenberg?" he asked. "Your father's funeral," Horatio replied. "Not my mother's wedding?" Hamlet joked bitterly. "It did follow very soon after," agreed Horatio. Hamlet barked a laugh. "Thrift, Horatio. The food from the funeral was used up at the wedding feast." Then his expression clouded once more. "I would rather have met my worst enemy in heaven than to have seen that day, Horatio." "He was a good king," Horatio said sadly. "I shall not see his like again," Hamlet sighed. "My lord," Horatio hesitated, "I think I saw him last night." "Saw who?" "The king, your father," replied Horatio. Together with the guards, he told the prince all about the ghostly apparition. Hamlet was agog. "I wish I had seen it," he cried, when they were finished. "I'll come and keep watch with you tonight. Perhaps it will come again. I'll meet you around midnight on the battlements. Until then." That afternoon, down at the port, Laertes was saying goodbye to his sister Ophelia. "Make sure I hear from you," he urged, taking her hands into his. "And about you and Hamlet." His sister's eyes sparkled at the very mention of the name. "I think you should treat his affections as no more than a trifle." Ophelia's pretty face fell. "No more than that?" she breathed. "No more," her brother said firmly. "Remember, his will is not his own. The whole state depends on his choice of wife. He would not be able to marry you despite his declarations of love." "I will remember," Ophelia promised sadly. Their father, Polonius, bustled in. "Still here, Laertes? Your ship is waiting. Before you go, let me give you some words of advice." He took a deep breath. Laertes and Ophelia, who knew their father well, exchanged amused glances as he launched into a lengthy list. "Listen to all, but speak to few. Take criticism, but do not judge too quickly. Be neither a borrower nor a lender. This, above all, be true to your own self, and it follows, as night follows day, you cannot then be false to anyone. Goodbye, father. Goodbye, Ophelia, and remember what I said." Laertes embraced them and ran down to his waiting ship. "What was that about?" Polonius asked. "Oh, just something about Hamlet," Ophelia said quietly. "Ah, yes," said Polonius. "He's been spending a lot of time with you lately. What's going on? Tell me the truth now." "Lately he has told me he loves me," Ophelia admitted, looking down as a blush rose in her cheeks. "You are naive," her father exclaimed. "Do you believe him?" Ophelia faltered. I do not know what to think." "I'll tell you then. You're a baby in such matters. You've taken tender words for truth, but they aren't real." "But he vowed by heaven he loved me," Ophelia protested. "Yes, but such vows are just traps to catch an unsuspecting bird. Do not believe his vows. They are not serious. From now on, I will not have you spend your time with or talk to Prince Hamlet." Ophelia looked crushed. "I will obey you, father," she said. That night on the battlements, 4 figures huddled, waiting, their breath making white clouds in the cold air. "What time is it?" Hamlet asked the others. "Nearly 12, Horatio said, and then he gasped. "Look, there it comes!" The ghost had appeared. It was the image of Hamlet's dead father, with a grim, pale face and grizzled beard. Slowly it raised its hand and beckoned to Hamlet. The prince stepped forward. "No, my lord, don't go," said Marcellus. "What if it beckons you over a cliff or draws you into madness?" Horatio warned, holding Hamlet back. Marcellus grabbed him too. "Unhand me," Hamlet ordered. "My life's worth no more than a pin to me." Breaking free from their grasps, he followed the ghost. "What can it mean? Where will this end?" Horatio fretted. "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark," Marcellus said. "I think we should follow him." And so they did. A little way along the battlements, away from the others, Hamlet had stopped. "Speak, I'll go no further," he told the ghost. The ghost turned and, in a solemn, hollow voice, said, "Mark my words. I am your father's spirit, Hamlet. If you ever loved your dear father, revenge his foul and unnatural murder." "Heavens!" Hamlet cried. It is said that when I was sleeping in my orchard, a serpent came and stung me. But I know this, the serpent that stung away your father's life now wears his crown. You mean my uncle? Your uncle poured poison in my ear while I slept, and it curdled my blood. Avenge me, but do not harm your mother. Leave her for heaven to deal with, and the thorns of conscience which prick and sting her. Adieu, Hamlet. Remember me. Fading, the ghost drifted away. Horatio and the others rushed out of the dark and surrounded Hamlet. My lord, what happened? Hamlet looked strangely giddy, his eyes two glittering stars in his pale face. I can't tell you. Only grant me one request. Never make known what you have witnessed here tonight. Swear, came a chilling voice from beneath them. They all jumped with fright. It was the ghost's voice. Swear it by my sword, Hamlet cried, and they all swore. Oh, this is a wondrous strange, Horatio declared. There are no more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than we can dream of, Hamlet replied. From now on, however strange or odd my behavior, you are not to comment in any way that reveals you know something of its cause. They all swore not to reveal a thing. The men trooped back inside, and Hamlet followed, his thoughts weighing on him heavily. From that moment, Hamlet was much changed. He wandered around the castle corridors, one moment joking and laughing, the next frowning and muttering wild, whirling words. He stared into space and jumped when he was spoken to. Sometimes he didn't even seem to recognize people. Polonius tried to talk to him, but Hamlet first called him a fishmonger and then asked whether he had a daughter. Of course, everyone knew Hamlet and Ophelia had been close. Rumors spread that the prince had lost his mind. The king and queen were worried. Claudius summoned two of Hamlet's childhood friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and asked them to keep an eye on the prince. If they could, they were to find out what was troubling him. When they found him, Hamlet gave his old friends a warm welcome. Friends, he cried, what brings you to this prison? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern exchanged glances. Prison? Denmark's a prison, Hamlet explained. Then the world's one too, replied Rosencrantz. Yes, Hamlet agreed blackly, with many dungeons inside, Denmark being one of the worst. So what are you doing here? Visiting you, said Rosencrantz. Thank you, said Hamlet. Did you come of your own free will, or were you sent for? One look at their faces told him the answer. I see, said Hamlet with a grimace. Well, I'll tell you why you were sent here. I have, of late, I do not know why, lost all joy in life. In fact, my heart is so heavy that this whole beautiful earth seems to me like a barren rock, the heavenly sky like a foul cloud of smoke, and man, how angelic, how godlike, nothing but a pile of dust. Nothing delights me anymore. He stopped, noticing Rosencrantz squirming. What is it? We met a theater troupe along the way and told them to come. We had hoped to cheer you up, Rosencrantz replied. Hamlet gave him a bright, brittle smile. He had always loved theater, and he asked about the troupe. They were still discussing them when the actors themselves were shown in by Polonius. Welcome, Hamlet cried, rushing to shake their hands. As he listened to their plan to perform a play at court that evening, an idea came to him. Could you, if need be, learn an extra scene that I will write to put into the play? He asked. Yes, my lord, said the lead actor. Hamlet nodded. I'll give it to you later. The actors continued into the castle, and Hamlet took his leave. Once alone, his seemingly cheery mood drifted away. I must be a coward, or I'd have avenged my father's death by now, he thought bleakly. Yet how can I act on a ghost's word alone? It might have been the devil come to tempt me to do evil. But now I have a plan. I have these players to do a scene that is like the murder of my father, right in front of my uncle. I'll watch him closely. If he so much as turns pale, I'll know what I have to do. The play's the thing. That's how I'll catch the consciousness of the king. When the king quizzed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they admitted that they hadn't found out the cause of Hamlet's turbulent moods. But old Polonius was convinced he had the answer. A few days earlier, Ophelia had come to him quite shaken. She had told him Hamlet had burst into her room, pale and trembling. He had seized her arm, stared at her face as if to fix its memory, then edged out of the room without saying a single word. He's clearly lovesick, Polonius concluded to the king. So Claudius decided to test out Polonius's theory. They told Ophelia to walk around reading a prayer book until Hamlet should come by. Then she should return the love letters he'd given her. They would hide and watch his reaction. Reluctantly, Ophelia took the prayer book, thrust into her hands, while her father and the king rushed off to hide. When Hamlet came along, he was so lost in thought that he did not even notice Ophelia. Paler than ever and agitated, he ran his fingers through his hair, pacing up and down. Hamlet was thinking grave thoughts indeed. He was thinking about suicide. To be or not to be, that is the question. Is it better to soldier on and suffer whatever fate brings, or fight against it and end all of your troubles? Oh, to die, to fall asleep, that's all it is. Perhaps to dream. Oh, there's the problem. For what kind of dreams come after this life? The fear of what comes after makes us suffer the ills we have rather than fly to those we know nothing of. He looked up and saw Ophelia looking anxiously back at him. "My lord," Ophelia said gently. "How are you?" Well, thank you," Hamlet said. She held out the sheath of letters. "I have some keepsakes which I want to give back. Please take them." Hamlet stared at the letters, his face a blank. "I never gave you anything," he said starkly. "My lord, you did. With such sweet words," Ophelia hesitated. She had believed the words he had written, but now her father and her brother had both told her that these words were meaningless, and so she held the letters out to Hamlet. "They have lost their charm. There, my lord." "Ha!" Hamlet laughed bitterly. "I did love you once." "You made me believe so," Ophelia said, her voice trembling. "You should not have believed me," Hamlet snapped, his attack hiding his hurt. "I did not love you." "Then I was mistaken," Ophelia said, her voice barely audible. "Go live in a convent," Hamlet said, his voice rising, "or else marry a fool. A wise man know what monsters you make of them. Farewell." He rushed away, leaving Ophelia still holding the letters. Ophelia broke down in tears. What was happening to Hamlet? He seemed so preoccupied, so desperate, so strange. She couldn't bear to see it. Help him, sweet heaven. His mind is overthrown. The king and Polonius emerged from their hiding place, scarcely paying attention to poor Ophelia. "I do not think that was love," the king told Polonius. It sounded more as if he was brooding on something, like an egg. "I think to let it hatch would be dangerous." He rubbed his beard. "I will send him to England. Perhaps the journey will dispel whatever has settled in his heart." That evening, the acting troupe was to perform a play for the whole court, including Hamlet's extra scene. "Don't overplay it, don't underplay it either," he had told them nervously. As he joined the gathering audience, he spotted Horatio. Horatio was a steady man. He took whatever came his way, good or bad, with equal cheer. That was why Hamlet needed him now. In this dangerous sea of emotion, Horatio could be his anchor. Hamlet confided in his friend. "The play is going to contain a scene which shows something like my father's death," he told him. "When that scene comes, please watch my uncle closely. If his guilty conscience does not reveal itself, then the ghost we saw was just a devil, and my imagination is running away with me." Horatio nodded. "I'll watch him. I promise." With a flourish of lighted torches and trumpets, the king and queen entered the hall. They took their seats, and the play began. The actors played a king and queen who embraced lovingly. Then the king lay down and went to sleep, and the queen left him. In came another man who took the king's crown and poured poison in his ear. At that point, King Claudius sprang to his feet. "Lights away," he cried, and swept out of the room, hurriedly pursued by attendants carrying flaming torches. The queen followed with her servants, and soon the room was almost empty. The play ground to a halt, the actors bewildered. "Play some music instead," Hamlet ordered them, rushing over to Horatio. "I'll take the ghost's word for it. Did you see?" "I saw very well," his friend affirmed. Before they could speak further, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern came rushing back to Hamlet. "The king is in a temper," Guildenstern told him, "and your mother wants a word with you." "I'll come. I'm on my way," said Hamlet. His blood roared in his ears as he made his way along the dark, shadowed corridors. Finally, he had proof that his uncle had killed his father, proof that the truth of the ghost's words, proof that he must now take action. He could put it off no longer. The king's door was ajar. Peering through, he saw the king inside. I could do it now, he thought, gripping his sword. But as he watched, the king flung himself to his knees in a prayer. If I kill him while he's praying, his soul will fly straight to heaven, thought Hamlet. Better catch him while he's sinning, so he goes straight to hell. So he hurried away to see his mother. In fact, The king had not been praying. He'd been trying to, but now he sat back on his heels and sighed. I cannot, he thought. My words fly up to heaven, but my thoughts remain below. My crime is awful. A brother's murder? Yet I cannot repent while I still hold on to the gains from it, the queen and the crown. In her chamber, the queen twisted her hands as she waited for her son to appear. Polonius was there, advising her what to say. Hearing Hamlet's footsteps, he slipped behind a curtain. I'll stay here and watch. Mother, what's the matter? Hamlet said, striding in. Hamlet, you have offended your father, came the reply. Mother, you have offended my father, Hamlet retorted. Queen Gertrude's lips trembled. If you will not listen to me, I'll have someone else speak to you, she said, turning away. Hamlet seized her and sat her down in front of her mirror. You will not budge until you've taken a good look at yourself. The queen looked at his grim face in the mirror. What are you doing? She wailed. Are you going to murder me? Polonius squealed behind the curtain, and Hamlet swung around and thrust his sword into the velvet, crying, What's that, a rat? There was a thud as Polonius's body fell to the ground. What have you done? Screamed the queen. I don't know, Hamlet cried. Is it the king? The queen drew back the curtain, and they both stared in horror at the dead body. What a rash, bloody deed, the queen gasped. Almost as rash and bloody as killing a king and marrying his brother, Hamlet spat. His mother's face turned as pale as paper. What? Killing a king? She said. That's what I said, Hamlet replied. Mother, sit down and let me wring out your heart. You've married a murderer. Don't, cried the queen, sinking back down. These words are like daggers. But then Hamlet stopped, swinging round to look behind him. What do you want? He cried hoarsely. Have you come to chide me for not carrying out your command? Alarmed, Queen Gertrude turned too, but saw nothing. Hamlet, you're talking to empty air. But Hamlet could see the ghost of his father. Do not forget, the ghost said grimly. Remember what you should do. The ghost disappeared, and Hamlet turned back to his mother. She was staring at him askance, her tress slipping away once more. Do not flatter yourself that it was my madness rather than your sin talking, he said desperately. Repent your sins. He left her there and muttered to himself, dragged Polonius's body out of the door. The king came in to find the queen weeping. She told him what Hamlet had done. He's mad, she sobbed. Mad. We must ship him off, Gertrude, said the king. It's not safe to keep him here after his vile deed. He called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and asked them to fetch Hamlet. Where is Polonius? He demanded when they brought him. At supper, Hamlet replied, being eaten by worms. Where is he? Insisted the king. If he's in heaven, send a messenger to see. If he's in hell, look for him yourself, Hamlet answered wildly. But if you don't find him within the month, you'll smell him in the hallway. The king sent people to fetch the body. Hamlet, for this deed you must go away. You must leave for England. That very night, a quiet ship took Hamlet away from Denmark. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern accompanied him, carrying a sealed letter from Claudius, addressed to the King of England. A few days later, another ship arrived. It brought Laertes, who had heard the news of his father's death. Bent on revenge, he burst in to see the king, demanding to know what had happened. Why was he not charged with the crime? He said furiously once the king confirmed Hamlet's guilt. His mother and the public dote on him, Claudius said, but do not think I take it lightly. This matter is not at an end. At that moment, the door opened, and in came Ophelia, her arms full of flowers, singing distractedly. She went to her brother Laertes, but hardly seemed to see him. Her father's death had had a terrible impact on her. For the last few days, she had been wandering around the castle, alternating between weeping and singing, like a sad, broken bird. Laertes' heart wrenched as she started handing him flowers one by one. There's rosemary for remembrance and pansies for thoughts. There's rue. She stared sadly out the window. I would give you violets, but they all withered when my father died. Laertes took her pale hand and touched her pale cheek, but Ophelia pulled away, raising her sweet, heartbroken voice in a song once more, and drifted out of the door. As she left, a messenger arrived with a letter. From Prince Hamlet, my lord. How can that be? Snapped the king. Hamlet is on a ship to England. He broke open the seal and read, High and mighty, I have come back to your kingdom. I beg leave to see you tomorrow and explain my sudden and strange return. Hamlet. Claudius was alarmed and confused. What can this mean? Let him come, Laertes said grimly. It warms my heart that I will be able to face him and say, This is how you shall die. A gleam came into the king's eyes. It would be better, for his mother's sake, if it looked like an accident? Laertes met his eyes. I will put poison on the tip of my sword, so if it even scratches him, he will die, he said vehemently. You can challenge him to a duel, said Claudius, and I'll prepare a drink, a poisoned chalice. Your fight will make him thirsty. When he calls for a drink, I'll give it to him. There came a cry, and Queen Gertrude burst in. Laertes, it's your sister. She is drowned. No, how, where? Laertes cried. The workers in the field saw her float downstream. Her skirts, billowed out, buoyed her up. But before they could reach her, the water seeped into the heavy fabric and dragged her down. She was found under a willow in the stream, her arms still full of flowers. Preparations for poor Ophelia's funeral were set in motion, and the grave diggers began to dig her grave. Unaware of this, Horatio was on his way to the graveyard to meet Hamlet. He had received a letter from the prince, too. It said Hamlet's ship had been attacked by pirates at sea. As his own ship fought them off, Hamlet had slipped aboard the pirate ship and sailed away with them. After the promise of a handsome reward, they had delivered him home. He wanted to meet Horatio in the graveyard. Horatio found his friend staring at the skulls that the gravedigger was unearthing as he dug the fresh grave. That one had a tongue in it and could sing once, Hamlet said mournfully. See this one? It was Yorick, the old king's jester, the gravedigger said, handing him another. Hamlet took the skull sadly and stared at it. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. He always had a joke to tell. He must have carried me on his back 1,000 times when I was little. Where are your jokes and songs and merriment now? He said to the skull, and then set it gently back down. Who's this grave for? He asked the gravedigger. A young woman who died, the gravedigger replied. Here comes her coffin now. Over the hill came a funeral procession. Laertes led the way, along with the king and queen. Hamlet and Horatio retreated from the grave, hiding behind the cluster of trees to watch. Laertes spoke. Lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. As the attendants lowered the coffin into the grave, he leaped in after it with a loud cry. Ophelia? Hamlet choked. Before Horatio could stop him, he raced out of the trees. You think your grief would stop the stars? Well, here I am. He too leapt into the grave, crying, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers' love could not equal mine. Laertes dived at him, raining blind, furious punches down on him. Hamlet held him off, saying, I loved you too. Why are you treating me like this? But no matter. Pushing Laertes aside, he stumbled out of the grave and ran off into the trees. Be patient, the king told Laertes. Remember the plan. Horatio followed Hamlet and, once Hamlet was calm, asked him to explain what had happened at sea. I could not sleep, Hamlet told him, so I slipped into Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's cabin. I found the letter to the English king, and I opened it. Horatio, inside was a command that my head should be chopped off as soon as I reached England. Is it possible? Horatio gasped. Hamlet handed him the letter. See for yourself. But there's more. I replaced the document with one of my own. Mine said that when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern delivered it, they should be executed on the spot. I sealed it with my father's ring. The next day, as you know, I escaped. Horatio, don't you think I should kill Claudius now? He's murdered my father, taken my mother, and tried to have me killed. He will soon hear what's happened in England, too, but wait a moment, said Horatio. Someone's coming. It was a messenger with a message that Laertes had challenged Hamlet to a duel. The king and Laertes were waiting for them in the hall. Hamlet went straight to Laertes. Please forgive me. I've done you wrong, he said. In my madness I have hurt my friend. I understand, Laertes said stiffly, but I cannot let this go. I must still fence with you. Very well, said Hamlet. Give us the swords. Wine was brought in, which the king directed to the table. Swords were brought, and the fencing began. The two young men lunged and parried. A hit, cried Hamlet. A hit, the umpire confirmed. Claudius took a sip from one of the goblets, and then slipped a pearl of poison into it. Hamlet, he called, take a sip of wine. You must be thirsty. Let's finish this round, Hamlet said, fighting on. Another hit, he cried, moments later. The queen entered the room to watch the duel. Hamlet, I'll drink to your health, she called. Then she picked up the poisoned goblet of wine and put it to her lips. No, cried the king. But it was too late. She had already drunk from the cup. He gritted his teeth and fell silent. Come on, Laertes, you're toying with me, Hamlet said. Laertes lunged at him, and there was a scuffle. They dropped their swords, and Hamlet picked up Laertes' sword. "Another hit," he cried, nicking Laertes' arm. But Laertes had cut him first. "They're both bleeding," Horatio called. There was a cry, and the queen collapsed. "She's fainted because of the sight of blood," Claudius said hastily. "No, no," came a faint cry from the queen. "The drink! Oh, my dear Hamlet, the drink! I've been poisoned!" "Lock the doors," cried Hamlet. "Find the traitor." Laertes fell to his knees, gasping. "I am the traitor. Hamlet, the sword now in your hand was poisoned. My foul plan has backfired, and I'm about to die. You will die from it, too. Your mother is poisoned. The king's to blame." He collapsed onto the floor. "The sword has poison on it?" Hamlet cried. "Then let it work on this." He lunged at Claudius and plunged the sword into his side. "Help!" Claudius cried. But Hamlet took the poisoned cup and forced it between his lips. "Here, you murderous Dane, drink your own poison." Claudius gulped, choked, and fell to the ground, dead. Hamlet sank back, gasping from his own poisoned wound, and Horatio rushed to catch him. "Hamlet," Laertes whispered faintly, "exchange forgiveness with me now. My father's death was not your fault." Hamlet nodded. "And may heaven free you of any guilt for mine," he whispered. Poor Laertes lay his head down and died. Hamlet turned back to his friend. "Horatio, I'm going to die, but you will live on." Horatio sobbed, "No, I can't," and seized the chalice. With the last of his strength, Hamlet wrestled it from his grasp. "Horatio, if you ever held me in your heart, then live. Live in this harsh world, if only to tell my story. The rest is silence." Horatio bent over his friend as Hamlet closed his eyes for the last time. "Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince. May flights of angels sing you to your rest." The end. See you next week.